All right, guys, here we go. Today's lecture will get into how Earth acts as a system. It'll get a little bit into what systems are. It will also talk about what is an open system versus a closed system. Wrap up the lecture with the 5 branches of Earth science. And really, when we go through this, you should understand that this is laying out the framework for the rest of the year. These are the topics that we'll talk about from now until the end of the year in June. So, what is a system? Here's a solar system. Why do they call it a system? Because simply put, a system is anything that works together. And if you remove one portion of that system, the rest of the system may not function properly. For example, here's the sun. And if we take the sun out of the solar system, the rest of the system would fail. None of the planets would have anything to revolve around, so they wouldn't be here. So a system, simply put, is something that works together. Now, just a cue, if you have not done so yet, you want to make sure you have your notes out and that you are taking notes on what a system is and the different types of systems in the 5 branches of Earth science. If I go too fast for you at any point, feel free to pause, go back, to go at your own pace. So, what's an open system? An open system has both an exchange of matter and energy. They're free to go in and out. For example, we have a pot of boiling water here. And in here, we actually have a couple things going on in terms of an exchange of matter. The pasta that goes into the water, that's matter going into the system. And eventually that will get cooked and that pasta will come out of the system. So that's an exchange of matter. In addition, the water in the boiling pot, that's also an exchange of matter. Why? Because the water goes in the pot when it's cold, and then it boils, and this steam that's leaving right here is matter that's leaving the system. So that's an exchange of matter. How about the exchange of energy? Well, how did the pot of water boil? This thing's on a stovetop that's giving it a lot of heat. So there's energy going into the system. There's also energy leaving. If you put your hand over the water, you're going to feel heat that's getting released from the water. That's an exchange of energy. So again, in an open system, there's both an exchange of matter and energy. How about a closed system? In a closed system, one of those things are cut off. Here's a snow globe that my kids got me not too long ago. And I took that snow globe and I put it outside. Now, as the sun is beating down on the snow globe, there's definitely energy that's going in here. And if I left it out there in the hot sun, this whole thing would definitely get warmer. The water inside would get warmer, the whole apparatus. But once I bring it inside out of the sun, then that water that's in the snow globe would begin to release that heat. So there's definitely an exchange of energy going on here. And there's no exchange of matter. One of these things got cut off. So in this example here, energy can come in and out, but there's no exchange of matter at all. So that's a closed system. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that matter is cut off. Maybe energy is cut off. Maybe there's something that takes matter in and lets it go out, but the energy gets cut off. The point is that in a closed system, it's missing an exchange of either the matter or the energy. And the big question is then what's Earth? Is it a closed system or an open system? And that's something I want you to think about for tomorrow, and we'll talk about it. Does Earth have a natural exchange of both matter and energy? All right, next let's talk about the branches of Earth science. There are 5 of them, and again, we're laying out the framework for what we're going to talk about throughout the entire year. Here's our first branch of Earth science. It's called astronomy. Simply put, astronomy is the study of the universe. It studies everything from the systems within the universe, such as our solar system, to exploring space. We no longer use the space shuttles here, but we're still sending things up there. To maybe the birth and death of stars, galaxies, nebulas, whatever you can name that's out there in the universe, that's all included in astronomy. Next branch of Earth science that we're going to study is called geology. This is the study of the origin and the history of the physical Earth. This is where we're going to spend most of the year. After our unit in astronomy, we're going to jump right into geology, and we'll spend most of our year in geology until we get to meteorology. So what does geology study specifically? What does that origin and history of the physical Earth include? Oh, well, it includes rocks, minerals, the building blocks of the Earth, Earth's resources, how we use them wisely or how we're not, renewable, non-renewable resources, the things we get from the Earth that we use in our everyday lives. Talks a little bit about how the crust of Earth moves around, continental drift and plate tectonics. Gets into volcanoes, and then we'll relate that back over to mountain building and different types of mountains that can be seen throughout the world, how the Rockies different from the Appalachians. We'll relate all that back to earthquakes. We'll look at some case studies of earthquakes. Here's the Alaska earthquake, Fairbanks of 1964, one of the biggest earthquakes in history. We'll talk about topographic maps. This is a record of Earth's history it's kind of like a textbook of Earth's history, so we'll definitely take a look at those. We'll take a look at the destructive processes of Earth. Where did this big hole come from? The Grand Canyon here. If this used to be filled with rocks, what type of power or forces within nature tore it down? Well, we'll talk about rivers going along with that theme, and we'll relate that back to weathering and erosion, as well as caves and glaciers. These are all things that affect the shape, the history, the origin, and the processes of the natural Earth. We'll talk then about oceanography. This is the third branch of Earth science. We're actually going to sneak it in earlier, right after plate tectonics and oceanography, but it is its own branch. This is the scientific study of the oceans. It doesn't deal really with the life in the ocean, so we're not going to be looking at schools of fish, but we are going to be taking a look at maybe undersea volcanoes. We'll take a look at the structure of the ocean. We'll take a look at tides. This kind of ties in with astronomy, showing the relationship between these branches. Then we'll move over to meteorology. This is where we'll spend most towards the end of the year, maybe the last month of school. And in doing so, we'll take a look at Earth's atmosphere. And Earth's atmosphere is this little blue haze right here. This is space up here. Here's the moon. Here's Earth. And this fading blue haze is the atmosphere. So we'll talk about its layers and its structure and our interactions with it. We'll talk about weather prediction. You'll kind of know what these H's and L's are and what these little symbols are all over the map and these lines going all over the place, how they're drawn and how they can be used to predict the weather. We'll talk about severe weather, things like lightning and tornadoes and hurricanes. And we'll also talk about our fifth branch of Earth science, kind of interlaced into most of our units, environmental science. This is our impact on the Earth and how we use Earth's resources wisely. So we're not going to really study one big environmental science unit. We're going to kind of thread it into every unit that we talk about. We'll always have an environmental science theme. All right, so that's it. We went through how Earth is a system. Remember, come in tomorrow ready to discuss if Earth is an open system or a closed system. And we also talked about the branches of Earth science and the framework for the rest of the year. Now, one thing I want you to notice about that framework is everything builds on top of one another. I kept on saying how one topic relates to another, and that's the way Earth science works. There's nothing we're going to study that's stranded that's by itself. It all links together in one complete system. All right, see you tomorrow. Remember, if you missed any of this, please go back, pause, go at your own pace. Write down any questions you have, and we'll see you tomorrow.